We ate at the kitchen table, two old soldiers who knew that sometimes the hardest fight comes after the shooting stops. You did right, Robert. Family or not, you can't let people steal your dignity along with your money. Doesn't make it hurt any less, I admitted. No, but it makes it honorable hurt instead of stupid hurt. After Frank left, I sat alone with my thoughts, and the weight of $1.3 million that suddenly felt less like fortune and more like responsibility. Outside, evening shadows lengthened, and a distant church bell chimed 9 times. I picked up the phone. Directory assistance. Cleveland. I need the number for the Veterans Crisis Support Center. Connecting you now. Veterans Support, this is Jim. How can I help? Jim, my name is Robert Thompson. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I want to make a substantial donation to help homeless veterans. That's wonderful. Can I ask what inspired this generosity? I looked around my reclaimed house, at the photos of a family that no longer existed, at a victory that felt more like survival than triumph. Let's just say I learned the difference between having a house and having a home. I want to help other veterans avoid sleeping on the street. The Veterans Support Center was in a converted warehouse on Cleveland's east side. Its brick facade was worn but welcoming. I had driven past it countless times over the years without really seeing it, the way we ignore things until they matter personally. Jim McAllister met me at the door, a man in his 50s with the bearing of someone who'd served overseas and the empathy of someone who understood that battles don't always end when you come home. Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming. When you mentioned a substantial donation, I have to admit, I was curious about the amount. $300,000, I said. He stopped and stared, as if I'd just told him I was giving him a spaceship. 300,000? That's enough to house and feed veterans for a year. To change lives. That's the idea. He led me past dormitory-style rooms where men and women who'd served their country now struggled for basic shelter. In the common area, a Vietnam veteran my age was showing a younger man how to fill out job applications. Mark, my former son-in-law, had threatened to put me in a place like this if I didn't cooperate. It felt fitting to turn his threat into something positive. We finished the paperwork in Jim's modest office, surrounded by letters of thanks from veterans who had been helped to stand back on their feet. As I signed the donation check, I felt a sensation I hadn't experienced since Martha passed, the quiet satisfaction of improving someone else's life. Mr. Thompson, this contribution will allow us to expand into transitional housing, the volunteer said. Veterans won't just have a roof for the night. They'll have time, guidance, and support to rebuild their lives. Driving home, I realized the house wasn't as empty as it had felt yesterday. Still, it carried too much silence, too many lingering echoes from conversations that would never happen again. The Cuyahoga County Animal Shelter sat on the edge of town, a low brick building fenced in with chain link, filled with the hopeful barks of dogs waiting for second chances. I hadn't planned to stop, but a sign advertising senior dog adoptions caught my eye. Looking for anyone in particular? A volunteer asked when I approached the front desk. Someone who needs a home as much as I need company, I replied. She led me to the senior dog section, where animals past their prime waited with quiet dignity, hoping for a family willing to love them despite graying muzzles and slower steps. This is Buddy, she said, stopping at a kennel containing a golden retriever mixed with cloudy eyes and a gentle face. 8 years old, house-trained, great with people. His previous owner passed away, and the family couldn't keep him. Buddy looked up at me with the quiet wisdom of a dog who understood that life sometimes shifts in ways you can't control, but that hope and trust remain. Can I walk him? I asked. 15 minutes later, Buddy and I sat in my car, both of us adjusting to the sudden reality of a new partnership. He settled into the passenger seat with the contented air of someone who had finally found what he was seeking. At home, Buddy explored cautiously, while I set out his food and water. Just having another living presence changed the atmosphere of the house. Footsteps, breathing, the occasional jingle of his tags. It was a new soundtrack, one of companionship instead of echoes. Later, The mailman delivered a thick envelope with Emily's handwriting, her familiar script unmistakable. Inside were 3 pages, rewritten and polished with care. Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for being caught, but for ever valuing money above your trust. Mark convinced me we were helping you, that you'd thank us later. I see now how wrong that was. I read the letter twice while Buddy dozed at my feet. Emily described her financial ruin, her crumbling marriage, her struggle to find work with a criminal record. She begged for forgiveness, promised restitution, and swore she had learned about greed, family, and loyalty. At the end, she wrote, I know I have no right to ask this, but could you forgive me? Not for me, but because I can't bear the thought of you dying alone and angry. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer with other documents I might need one day but didn't want to see daily. Then I reached down and scratched Buddy behind the ears, savoring the simple joy of unconditional companionship. What do you think, boy? I murmured. Some mistakes are too big to forgive. Some people take too long to discover what truly matters. Buddy thumped his tail, offering the kind of quiet reassurance that money couldn't buy and family hadn't provided. The phone rang at 8. Mr. Thompson, I hope I'm not intruding, said Sarah Campbell from the Cleveland newspaper. Her voice carried the excitement of someone who'd found a story worth telling. We'd like to do a feature on your case. Not just the legal side, but what it reveals about family, trust, and standing up to elder abuse. I looked at Buddy, who met my gaze with calm intelligence, and realized that maybe my story was bigger than personal betrayal and courtroom victories. Miss Campbell, when would you like to talk? I asked. Later, the newspaper photographer adjusted his camera while I sat in the living room chair, Buddy loyal at my feet. Sarah Campbell reviewed her notes, ready to draw on not only the facts but the deeper meaning. Mr. Thompson, when you first suspected your daughter and son-in-law of fraud, what went through your mind? Disbelief, I said. Then disappointment. Then determination. I had spent my life teaching Emily about honesty and family loyalty. When she chose greed over those lessons, I realized I had to decide, remain a victim, or stand and fight. Sarah's pen moved rapidly across her notepad. You hired a private investigator before contacting the police. That's impressive foresight. Military habits never fully leave you. You evaluate threats, gather intelligence, then confront the enemy. In my case, the enemy wore familiar faces. The interview lasted 2 hours, covering everything, from my Vietnam service to Martha's death, to the moment I called 911 with forged documents spread across my dining table. Sarah asked thoughtful questions that helped me see my own story more clearly. What advice would you give other seniors who might face situations like yours? Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is, even if it involves family. Document everything. Seek professional help. And remember, age doesn't make you helpless unless you allow it. The following week, Channel 5 News called, requesting a TV interview for their senior advocacy segment. Soon after, the Veterans Organization asked me to speak at their monthly meeting about financial security for aging members. Standing at the podium in the VFW hall, looking into faces weathered by military service and civilian hardships, I felt the weight of speaking for more than just myself. Brothers and sisters, we've faced enemies overseas. Now we confront a different kind at home. People who see our age as weakness, our trust as opportunity, and our savings as their personal jackpot. But we didn't survive war zones and build lives just to hand it all over to con artists wearing familiar faces. The applause was warm, but the conversations afterward mattered more. 3 veterans shared their own stories of financial manipulation by adult children, caretakers, and supposed advisors. My nephew tried to get me to sign over my house last month, said Bill McCarthy, a Korean War vet. After hearing your story, I told him to take a long walk off a short pier. Driving home from the VFW meeting, I realized my personal battle had grown into something larger, a warning for vulnerable people, a reminder that self-defense doesn't end at 75. The Sunday morning Cleveland Plain Dealer feature ran with photos of Buddy and me, plus a sidebar on spotting elder financial abuse. By Monday, 17 calls poured in, people sharing stories, seeking advice, thanking me for speaking out. Tuesday brought a call from a national news producer interested in featuring my case in a series on elder abuse. Wednesday, a law enforcement group requested permission to use my story in officer training. "Buddy," I said, scratching behind his ears as we sat on the porch, "it seems our little family drama has turned into a public service announcement." The attention was flattering but overwhelming. I didn't want fame for surviving my daughter's greed, but I understood it might help others recognize danger in their own lives. Thursday evening, Emily called. Her voice was small, distant. "Dad, I read the article. I'm glad you're helping others, but seeing our family's private matters on the front page." "Emily," I said, "our private business went public the moment you and Mark made me commit fraud. I didn't choose this attention, but I won't waste it. Are you ever going to forgive me?" I looked at Buddy. He watched patiently, understanding that some questions have no simple answers. "Forgiveness isn't a one-time gift, sweetheart. It's a process if both people are willing. Right now, I'm focused on healing from what you did, not making you feel better about it." A silence stretched between us, a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. "I understand," she whispered. "I hope someday. Someday is a long way off, Emily. Focus on today and making better choices." After she hung up, I stayed on the porch with Buddy as stars appeared over Cleveland. Across town, my daughter was living with the consequences of her choices. Somewhere in federal prison, Mark was learning that cleverness without character eventually destroys itself. And here, in my home, finally mine again, an old soldier discovered that the greatest victories aren't always the ones giving everything you wanted, but the ones teaching what truly matters. The phone stopped ringing as frequently. Interview requests slowed. Yet the impact continued unseen, seniors recognizing con artists, families having tough conversations about money and trust, victims finding courage to fight back instead of surrendering. Perhaps that's what justice really looks like. Not only punishment for the guilty, but protection for those who come after. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. The government seized my home, worth $1 million, because I ignored the warnings of my son-in-law, a smug Wall Street con artist. When they changed the locks and sneered, "Find yourself a shelter, old man," I dialed 911. What happened afterward drained the color from their faces. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 p.m. on July 1st, just as Emily had promised. I set down my coffee and rose slowly, my old Vietnam injury nagging worse in the summer heat. Through the peephole, I saw my daughter's perfectly coiffed blonde hair, and her husband Mark's gleaming designer suit reflecting the Cleveland sun. "Dad," Emily said, her voice wrapped in that fake cheer I'd grown used to. She hugged me, too tightly, too practiced, the expensive scent of her perfume smothering the familiar smell of my aftershave. Mark followed with his polished Wall Street grin, extending a carefully manicured hand. "Robert, always a pleasure." I squeezed back firmly. At 75, I might not move like I used to, but decades in construction had left me with a grip strong enough to remind him I wasn't broken yet. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "There's iced tea in the kitchen." They sank into my living room chairs like they already owned the place. Mark's eyes darted around, scanning the modest furniture, the photographs of my late wife Martha, the medals in the shadow box above the mantel. "Dad, the house looks—" Emily hesitated, then forced a smile. "It looks exactly the same. Why would I change it? Your mother chose most of this. Still works just fine." Mark leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Actually, Robert, that's part of the reason we came. We've been thinking about your future, what's best for you." Something in his tone made me set my glass down. I'd heard that voice before, businessmen dressing up bad news as concern. "My future's just fine," I said evenly. Emily glanced at him, then back at me with those blue eyes that used to remind me of her mother. Dad, we worry about you here alone. This house is big. You're getting older. It's a lot to manage. I've been managing it. But for how much longer? Mark cut in, his voice harder. What happens if you can't climb the stairs anymore? What happens if you fall with no one around? The afternoon light through the windows suddenly felt sharp. I studied him, his jaw tightening every time he mentioned my limits, as though my age was a problem he wanted solved. I appreciate the concern, I said slowly. But I'm not ready for a nursing home. Emily gave a brittle laugh. Who said anything about a nursing home? We're talking about something better. Mark pulled a sleek leather portfolio from his briefcase, the kind you only see with lawyers or consultants. There's a top-tier retirement community in Florida. Sunshine year-round, great amenities, people your age. It's perfect. And what about my house? His smile widened. That's where we can help. I've got real estate connections. Emily and I could handle the sale for you. Take that responsibility right off your plate. The only sound was the steady ticking of Martha's grandfather clock. I looked at my daughter, searching for some trace of the little girl who once cried over stepping on an ant in the garden because she couldn't bear to hurt anything. And my savings? I asked quietly. Safe, Mark said smoothly. In fact, I could invest it for you. Double it within a year. I have access to opportunities ordinary people never see. There it was. Not love. Not genuine concern. Just profit. A knot formed in my chest, heartbreak tangled with anger, the same ache I hadn't felt since Martha's funeral. Emily took my hand gently. Dad, we only want you to be comfortable. To be safe. I squeezed her hand, feeling the softness of her skin, the ring Mark had given her, the life she'd built far from the values I raised her with. I'll need time to think, I said. Mark's jaw flexed. Of course. But don't wait too long, Robert. Opportunities like this don't last. After they left, I sat alone in the fading light, the clock ticking steady as the shadows grew. Each second suddenly felt more precious than it had that morning. The next day brought rain, a steady drizzle that made my bones ache. I'd barely slept, replaying their words again and again. By the time Emily called at 8:30, I was already dressed, the morning paper folded neatly beside my coffee. Dad, I hope I didn't wake you. I've been up since 5, sweetheart. You know how it is. She gave a forced laugh. Right. Of course. Listen, Mark and I talked more last night, and we still think Florida is perfect for you. I looked up the place. It's got a pool, a library, even a workshop where you could tinker like you used to. I glanced out the window. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson, 82 years old, was out in the drizzle, tending her roses. She still lived alone. Still drove herself to the grocery store every Thursday. Emily, can I ask you something? Of course, Dad. When your mother was sick, do you remember what she told you about family? There was a pause. She said family comes first. That's right, I said. She told us we look out for each other. We don't take from one another. I don't know what you mean, Emily replied, but the strain in her voice told me she understood all too well. Your mother left me this house, Emily. She left me my independence. And she raised you to know better than what you and Mark are trying to do. Dad, you're overreacting. We're just trying to help. No. You're trying to help yourselves. The line went still except for the sound of her breathing. When she finally spoke again, her tone was smaller, closer to the little girl I used to know. Mark says the investment is guaranteed. He says it could benefit all of us. And what do you say, Emily? Not Mark's wife, my daughter. I don't know anymore, Dad. Things are hard. Money is tight. Mark has these opportunities. Money's always been tight, sweetheart. That's nothing new. What's new is thinking you can fix it by draining your father's savings. We're not stealing. You're just what? Go ahead, say it. Her voice cracked, and then came the sound of soft sobs, Tears that took me back to when she was 7 and broke Martha's favorite vase. That same helpless shame in her crying. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. But Mark says if we don't do this, if we don't make more money, we could lose the house in New York. The mortgage is crushing us. His job, the market hasn't been kind." Finally, the truth. "So you thought you'd fix your problems with my life savings?" "It's not like that. It's exactly like that, Emily. And you know it." I caught Mark's voice in the background then, sharp, urgent, too muffled to make out words. Her crying stopped like a switch had been flipped. "Dad, I have to go. But please, please think about it. Think about your future." "I'm thinking about it, sweetheart," I said softly. Very carefully. When the call ended, the silence in my kitchen felt heavy. Rain pattered against the window, and from the refrigerator, Martha's photograph seemed to watch me, her eyes carrying the same quiet disappointment I felt in my chest. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago but never thought I'd need. "Reed Investigations. Jack speaking?" "Jack, it's Robert Thompson. We met at the VFW last year." "Robert, of course. How are you holding up?" "I need your help. Something involving my family." "Family cases are always the toughest," Jack said. "Are you sure about this?" I looked around my kitchen. The home Martha and I had built, the product of 50 years of labor and careful saving. "I'm sure. I think my daughter and her husband are planning to strip me of everything. And I need to know exactly what they're up to before they do. I'll be there this afternoon." "Thank you, Jack." "Don't thank me yet, Robert. In situations like this, you might not like what I uncover." But I already knew. The question wasn't if Emily and Mark were scheming, it was how far they were willing to go. Jack Reed arrived at 3 o'clock sharp, carrying a worn leather briefcase and the wary posture of a man who'd seen too much in 20 years as a Cleveland detective. Gray threaded through his dark hair, and his sharp eyes carried the habit of someone who trusted no one without proof. "Coffee?" I asked as he sat down in my living room. "Black, if you've got it." I poured 2 cups and sat across from him, noticing how he positioned himself with a view of both the front door and the hallway. Old instincts. "Tell me what's going on, Robert." I laid it all out: yesterday's visit, Emily's call this morning, and the knot of certainty in my gut. Jack listened quietly, jotting notes in a small pad. "The Florida facility," he said once I'd finished. "Did they give it a name?" "Sunset Gardens. Mark said it's in Tampa." Jack wrote it down. "And this investment pitch? Any specifics?" "Just that he could double my money in a year. Said he had connections." Jack's face didn't move much, but I caught the subtle narrowing of his eyes. "Robert, let me be blunt. This has all the markings of a setup. They push the assisted living angle to move you out of the way. Then they get power of attorney, which gives them control over your assets. And that investment, that's how the money disappears without a trace. But Emily's my daughter. She wouldn't. She might not even realize she's part of the con," Jack said evenly. "Guys like Mark, they're good at convincing their wives they're respectable." He pulled a contract from his briefcase. "I'll need you to sign this, and I'll need a retainer. $500 up front. I bill $50 an hour, plus expenses." I signed without hesitation and handed him a check. "How long?" "Give me a week. I'll dig into Mark's background, confirm his employment, check out this Florida place. I'll also set up discreet surveillance." "Surveillance?" "People tend to show their true colors when they think no one's watching." That evening, I called Emily back. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed, not from age, but from the weight of what I was about to do. "Dad, I was hoping you'd call. Mark and I have been talking, and we think. I've made a decision, Emily." "You have?" Her voice instantly brightened. "I want to see the paperwork. All of it. The details on the Florida place. The investment information. Everything. Of course. Mark will be thrilled. He's already started drafting documents you'll need to sign." documents to sign, not materials to review. That distinction cut sharp in my mind. When can you bring them? This weekend. Saturday afternoon. Mark wants to go over everything with you, make sure you understand all the benefits. Saturday works. Oh, Dad. This is wonderful. You'll love Florida. And the money, Mark says with his contacts, we could see up to 200% returns. Maybe more. 200%. The number hung in the air like a bad joke. In 4 decades of working construction and then running crews, I'd never seen a supposedly solid investment promise anything close to what they were offering. Emily, can I ask you something? Of course, Dad. Do you remember what your mother used to say about deals that sound too good to be true? There was a pause. She said, they usually are. That's right, darling. Your mother was a sharp woman. Dad, are you having second thoughts? I'm not having second thoughts, Emily. I'm just recalling your mother's wisdom. After we hung up, I wandered through my home, truly noticing it for the first time in months. The polished hardwood floors Martha and I had refinished together. The kitchen where she'd shown Emily how to bake cookies. The living room where we'd celebrated Christmas mornings, birthdays, and lazy Sunday afternoons reading the paper side by side. They wanted to take all of that from me, sell it, and funnel my life savings into some scheme that benefited everyone but the man who'd spent 50 years earning it. But they'd made one fatal error. They assumed age made me helpless. They forgot I'd survived Vietnam, built a thriving business, and raised a family on values that didn't include stealing from those who loved you. Turning off the lights, heading upstairs, I almost found myself looking forward to Saturday. By then, Jack would have begun his investigation, and I'd have a far clearer sense of exactly who I was facing. The grandfather clock chimed 11 as I reached the landing. A steady reminder that time was precious, and some people had already wasted far too much of mine. Thursday morning, Jack called while I sipped my second cup of coffee, watching the sunrise light up the kitchen walls. Gold, he said. 3 days digging, and I've uncovered more than we expected. I'm already seated, Jack. What did you find? Sunset Gardens doesn't exist. The Tampa address they gave you? Vacant lot. 2 years empty. And Mark's investment? Classic Ponzi. I tracked down 3 other New York families who lost everything to the same pitch, same promises, same paperwork, same disappearing act. The bitter coffee caught in my throat. Everything clicked into place like rounds sliding into a rifle chamber. How long has this been going on? At least 18 months. Maybe longer. Your daughter, she may not realize the full extent of what her husband's doing, or maybe she knows perfectly well. I had a decision to make. What's our next move? I'll be recording everything Saturday. Equipment can pick up conversations from 3 rooms away. But Robert, you need to be careful. If they suspect I know anything, let me handle that, Jack. These 2 forgot who they're dealing with. Friday crawled by. I cleaned the house twice, organized my papers 3 times, and visited Martha's grave, telling her about our daughter's betrayal. The roses I'd planted in spring were in full bloom now, bright red against the gray stone. Saturday afternoon arrived with the precision of fate. Emily's car rolled into the driveway at exactly 2 o'clock. Mark's confident stride was already visible through the windshield. I watched them gather their briefcase and manila folders, ordinary items disguised as weapons. 3 houses down, Jack's surveillance van was parked, masquerading as a cable truck. I could see him inside adjusting the equipment through my kitchen window. The doorbell rang. Dad! Emily's smile was unnaturally bright, almost manic. Ready to start your new life? Mark swept past her, briefcase in hand like a conqueror planting a flag. Robert, today we make you rich. They spread their documents across the dining table with the efficiency of undertakers laying out burial garments, powers of attorney, property transfer deeds, investment contracts promising returns that would make lottery winners weep. See here, Mark said, tapping a gold pen. This gives Emily and me authority to manage your assets while you settle into your new Florida home. And this, Emily added, voice trembling slightly, temporarily transfers the house deed, just until we get the best price. I picked up the power of attorney, eyes on the signature line where my name had already been forged. Nearly flawless. Almost. You two have put a lot of effort into this, I said. Mark puffed with pride. I have connections, Robert. People who can make things happen fast and quietly. Most likely. Her cooperation could significantly reduce her sentence. Jack snapped his briefcase closed with satisfaction. Detective, with the evidence we've gathered, Mark Wilson is facing serious federal time, document forgery, wire fraud, and elder abuse across state lines. Minimum 7 to 10 years. Detective White gathered his notes. Mr. Thompson, we'll need you available for testimony once this goes to trial. Based on the evidence, I expect Mark will plead guilty to avoid a longer sentence. When will that happen? Likely within the month. Federal prosecutors move fast on a case this strong. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 75 years. Yesterday, I had been a victim. Today, I was a witness. Tomorrow, I would be a man whose family had been shattered by greed, yet whose dignity remained intact. Detective, can I ask you something? Of course. In your experience, do families ever recover from this? He looked at me with the quiet wisdom of someone who had watched money destroy more relationships than alcohol, drugs, or adultery combined. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. But sometimes, that's not always a bad thing. 2 weeks crawled by like wounded animals. The house felt different, not violated, exactly, but changed in ways I couldn't name. Every room echoed Saturday's confrontation. Every corner whispered that the daughter I had raised had tried to steal everything I'd built. The phone rang constantly, reporters seeking quotes about family betrayal, lawyers explaining legal procedures, bank officials apologizing for nearly allowing the fraud to succeed. I answered some calls, ignored others, learning to let the noise sort itself. Tuesday morning, Jack called with news that made my coffee taste like victory. Robert, they raided Mark's office in New York yesterday. FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Boxes of evidence, computer servers, the whole operation. Turns out your case was just the tip of the iceberg. What did they find? 4 more victims, all elderly, all swindled using variations of the same Florida retirement scam. One couple in Buffalo lost $600,000, their entire pension. Mark ran a sophisticated operation, fake websites, professionally designed brochures, even hired actors posing as satisfied residents of non-existent facilities. I set my coffee down slowly. Actors? The whole thing was theater? Pure, calculated theater, Jack said, designed to steal life savings from people who earned their security honestly. Through my kitchen window, I watched Mrs. Patterson tending her garden, as steady and predictable as ever, the kind of life Mark would never understand, because he'd spent his career believing cleverness could replace character. Thursday brought a call from an unexpected source. Mr. Thompson, this is Assistant District Attorney Lisa Anderson. I'm prosecuting your case and wanted to update you. I'm listening. Emily has agreed to testify against her husband in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's provided detailed information about Mark's criminal network, other victims, and evidence of systematic fraud dating back 3 years. 3 years minimum? Yes. Records before 2022 were deliberately destroyed. Your son-in-law is facing federal charges that could keep him in prison for a decade or more. That afternoon, I drove to the bank where Mark had tried to steal my money. Manager Michael Green met me personally, his handshake nervous, his apologies spilling like a broken dam. Mr. Thompson, I can't express how sorry we are about this situation. Our security systems should have detected the irregularities immediately. They should have, but they didn't. No, sir. They failed. As compensation, the bank is crediting your account with additional interest and waiving all fees related to this incident. We've also implemented enhanced verification procedures to prevent similar fraud. He handed me a statement showing my account balance. $124,789,243. More money than I'd ever seen in one place, returned with interest, as if Mark's betrayal had inadvertently enriched me. The irony would have been amusing if it hadn't cost me my family. Friday evening, Jack stopped by with a bottle of bourbon and the final findings of the investigation. Richard Stone confessed to everything, he said, sinking into Martha's old chair. Turns out Mark had been bribing him for over a year, falsifying documents across multiple schemes. Stone's facing 5 years in federal prison, though he'll probably serve closer to 3 with good behavior. The other victims should recover most of their money. Mark was smart enough to keep the stolen funds in traceable accounts rather than spending everything immediately. He was building towards something bigger, likely planning to disappear overseas once he hit a certain target. I poured bourbon into 2 glasses, the amber liquid catching the evening light like molten gold. How much bigger? I asked. Based on his computer records, he was aiming for 10 million total, then planning to vanish to a country without extradition. Your case would have pushed him over 8 million. We drank in silence, 2 older men calculating the mathematics of betrayal. $8 million stolen from people who had trusted their families, their banks, their government to protect the security they had spent a lifetime building. Jack, can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. In all your years investigating fraud, family fraud, do victims ever truly recover? He stared into his bourbon as if it contained answers. Financially? Usually. Emotionally? He shrugged. That depends on the person. Some let betrayal poison every other part of their lives. Others use it as fertilizer to grow stronger. The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail, but the caller's voice froze both of us. Dad, it's Emily. Please pick up. I know you're there. The trial is next month, and I need to speak with you before then. There are things you don't know, things about Mark I should have told you years ago. Please, Dad. I'm still your daughter. The machine clicked off, leaving silence so thick it felt physical. Outside, shadows stretched across the evening streets, and a church bell chimed 7 times. Jack finished his bourbon and rose. That's your decision, Robert. Whatever you decide, make it what's best for you, not what's easiest for her. After he left, I sat alone in the living room, staring at family photos, wondering if love could survive total betrayal, or if some wounds were too deep for forgiveness to reach. The trial was set for August 9th, 3 weeks to decide whether I still had a daughter worth saving or just a stranger who shared my blood and had helped a criminal try to steal my life. The Cuyahoga County Courthouse rose from downtown Cleveland like a monument to justice, its limestone facade weathered by decades of storms and human drama. I wore my best navy suit, the one Emily had bought for my attendance at her wedding 5 years ago, when Mark still pretended to be a decent man. Security screening felt like airport theater, but I welcomed the metal detectors. Some family betrayals cut so deep they push people to desperate acts. Courtroom 4B was larger than I expected, with tall windows letting morning light spill over wooden benches that resembled church pews, fitting, since we were about to witness either resurrection or burial of what remained of my family. Judge Margaret Cole entered with the calm authority of someone who had spent 20 years separating truth from lies. Her gray hair was tightly pulled back, her black robes crisp as freshly printed paper. She scanned the room with eyes that had witnessed every shade of human folly. The state of Ohio versus Mark Wilson and Emily Wilson, she announced. We are here for sentencing following guilty pleas entered by both defendants. Guilty pleas. They had avoided trial by confessing, which meant Emily had kept her promise to cooperate fully. I wasn't sure if I felt pride or disgust. Mark sat at the defendant's table, a shadow of the man he once appeared to be. Gone were the expensive suits and confident posture. His orange jumpsuit hung loosely on shoulders that seemed to have shrunk since his arrest. When he glanced toward the gallery, his eyes met mine for a moment before darting away like a guilty dog. Emily sat apart, her lawyer whispering last-minute instructions. She looked fragile in a plain blue dress, her hair simply pulled back, makeup minimal. Emily tried to look remorseful, sympathetic, deserving of leniency. Her act might have fooled someone else, but not me. I'd watched her rehearse similar performances for 45 years. Prosecutor Lisa Anderson rose to address the court. Younger than I had imagined, perhaps in her mid-30s, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent a career handling cases just like this. Your Honor, the defendants carried out an elaborate fraud targeting elderly victims across multiple states. Mr. Mark Wilson orchestrated this scheme, stealing over $4 million from seniors who trusted him with their life savings. Mrs. Emily Wilson assisted in these crimes by facilitating her husband's access to her father, Robert Thompson, who is present in court today. Judge Cole's gaze locked on me. Mr. Thompson, would you like to deliver a victim impact statement? I rose slowly, aware of the weight of the moment. This was no longer just a question of justice. It was a reckoning for family bonds shattered by betrayal. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady. I served my country in Vietnam. I buried my wife of 40 years. I survived recessions, job losses, hardships most people never encounter. But nothing prepared me for the day my own daughter tried to take everything I had spent a lifetime building. The courtroom was silent. Reporters scribbled notes. Other victims nodded in recognition. The money can be restored. My home can be secured. But trust between a father and daughter, once broken by greed, cannot be fully repaired. That's the real crime here, not merely theft of assets, but theft of love, of family, of the security that comes from believing your children will care for you rather than exploit you. I sat, and the silence that followed felt reverent, not awkward. Judge Cole consulted her notes before addressing the defendants. Mr. Wilson, you pleaded guilty to federal wire fraud, document forgery, and elder financial abuse. The evidence demonstrates a pattern of predatory conduct targeting our most vulnerable citizens. You exploited family ties and positions of trust for personal gain. Mark's lawyer spoke. Your Honor, my client is prepared to make full restitution and has cooperated completely with federal investigators to recover stolen funds for other victims. Cooperation noted. Judge Cole replied sharply. However, the sophistication and extent of these crimes require significant penalties. I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation, and full restitution to all victims. 8 years. Mark would be 53 upon release. His Wall Street career ruined, his reputation shattered, his marriage likely ended. He accepted the sentence with a vacant expression, the face of a man whose worst fears had come true. Mrs. Wilson, Judge Cole continued, your cooperation and first-time offender status are in your favor. But you participated in the financial abuse of your own father, a particularly grievous violation of family trust. Emily began to cry. Real tears this time, born of understanding that consequences were unavoidable, not rehearsed. I sentence you to 2 years of probation, 1,000 hours of community service specifically aiding elderly victims of financial crimes, and restitution of $50,000 to a fund supporting elder abuse prevention programs. No jail time for Emily. Relief and frustration warred inside me. The courtroom emptied with the mechanical efficiency of justice. Mark was led away in handcuffs, shoulders trembling with sobs, or fury. Emily approached me, face streaked with what looked like genuine tears. Dad, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know. I raised my hand, stopping her. You made your choices. I made mine. We both live with the consequences. Does that mean you'll never forgive me? She asked. I studied the woman who carried my blood yet had chosen greed over family, betrayal over love. Forgiveness wasn't simple. I'm still deciding if the daughter I raised is worth forgiving, or if she died the day you brought those forged papers into my house. I walked away, leaving her alone in the courthouse lobby with the weight of her actions and the echoes of justice rendered. Outside, Cleveland's summer heat struck like a wall, but it felt purer than the air inside the courtroom. Justice had been served. My money was secure. Mark would spend the next 8 years learning that cunning without character destroys itself. Walking down the courthouse steps, I carried the understanding that some victories demand more than defeats, and some family wounds never fully heal. They stop bleeding but leave scars, reminders to guard your heart. The drive home traced familiar neighborhoods I'd known for 40 years. The bakery where Martha bought birthday cakes, the hardware store where I'd built Emily's treehouse. Everything looked unchanged, yet I saw it through new eyes. A man who'd survived war but lost his family along the way. My house stood as I'd left it, white siding bright in the sun, Martha's rose bushes blooming defiantly despite all that had happened within these walls. I parked, sitting for a moment, keys in hand, processing the strange feeling of returning home to what was truly mine. Mrs. Patterson, watering her garden next door, hurried over. "Robert, we saw it on the news. 8 years for that awful man, and your daughter cooperating with the authorities. You must feel vindicated." "Vindicated?" I tested the word like wine gone sour. "That's one way to put it, Martha. But you've shown everyone that age doesn't make us easy prey." My grandson had called last night after seeing the story on Channel 5, just to check on my finances. Inside the house, everything was as I'd left it, but somehow different. The dining room table, where Mark had spread his forged documents, now looked like a battlefield long after the war had ended. The living room chair, where Emily had cried, still seemed to hold the ghost of her tears. I moved methodically through each room, reclaiming a space that had never truly been taken, yet had felt violated nonetheless. In my bedroom, I opened the safe where I kept my important papers. Everything was intact. Mark had been so certain of his forgeries that he hadn't even bothered to look for the originals. At 4 o'clock, the phone rang. Michael Green from the bank, his voice carrying the mixture of professional relief and institutional embarrassment. "Mr. Thompson, I have excellent news. Your account has been fully restored to $1,347,000, including compensation for the inconvenience and accrued interest during the investigation. More money than I'd ever held in one place, enough to live comfortably, travel anywhere, buy anything I wanted." But alone in the living room, surrounded by family photographs that now felt like evidence from a crime, I realized that wealth without people to share it with was just numbers on a screen. "Mr. Green, I appreciate everything the bank has done to make this right. Is there anything else we can do for you, sir? Perhaps enhanced security or a financial advisor? I'll let you know if I need anything," I replied. After hanging up, the house settled into its familiar evening calm. I prepared a simple dinner, washed the dishes, and sat with the newspaper. Ordinary tasks in a house that felt anything but ordinary. At 7:30, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Frank Conover from the VFW Post, carrying a casserole dish and wearing the expression of a man on a mission. "Frank, what brings you here?" "I heard about the trial on the Veterans Network," he said. "Figured you could use some company, and a decent meal." He set the casserole on the counter with military precision. "Tuna noodle casserole, my late wife's recipe. And before you say you're fine, remember, we've all fought battles where victory doesn't feel much like celebration.